Hello, Irene.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
It's good to be here. I love it when life kind of tosses me here. It feels like life deposits me here every now and then. And I'm always grateful to see the two of you when it does that.
Thank you so much.
There's such a natural flow to it. Like there's no, it just happens.
That's wonderful. The last we saw you, you were deposited in France.
I was. I
Oh,
was I was in the midst of
In
what
Paris.
appeared to be a lucid dream, and I really hit. I was so grateful for this. I left home, and it was like the door shut to my life.
mm,
I had no communication with anyone, my husband, my children, for 12 days.
wow.
And it really felt like it felt like I had died to
Mm,
this life and opened life in France to this adventure that was moment to moment.
mm.
And I don't think that I spoke to you when I got to this small town in the southeastern part of France.
Mm.
No,
And
no,
I was
you
on
were in Paris.
Prednis.
Yeah, you were in
Yeah, I
Paris.
was in Paris
Yeah.
when I spoke with you. And I had been diagnosed with asthma. I was on prednisone and I was on an inhaler and gasping for breath.
Oh,
And I arrived in this small southeastern town, and uh, just by way of allowing life to lead, I got to the train station in Paris and didn't know where to go. There was no pull to go anywhere. I was in this lucid dream, and no matter where I went, I was still going to be within the lucid dream. So it didn't really matter where I went.
Yeah.
It was a really strange place to be. So I asked the women at the train station who were working behind the counter if they could help me find a destination. And they chose a destination for me. And they had a blast doing it because they were like, well, you could go here. And they were getting so excited about all the places I could go.
That's
And
wonderful.
finally, it was this small town in the southeastern part of France and about an hour from Geneva. And I said, how far is the train? And they said, 4 hours. I said, that sounds lovely. I got on the train and I made a reservation at a hotel and I arrived there. And unbeknownst to them or to me, there was this yearly festival that was going to happen there that weekend for which people make reservations a year in advance. But I didn't know this. So I arrived at my hotel and I put things down and I thought, yeah, I would like to stay a few more days here. This is a lovely place and I'll extend my stay. So I stopped at the hotel and they said, oh, you won't find anything here. You won't find anything in town. And I said, okay, no worries. And I looked online and I couldn't find anything in that town or the next town or the next town, no Airbnb. There was nothing.
Um,
And now I'm tired. The time zone is catching up with me, and I'm sitting in front of this lake. And what arises is I'm alone in the universe, and no one is coming to save me.
mm.
Mm.
And it was as painful on an emotional level as passing a kidney stone is on a physical level.
It's like
And
existential, it's like existential angst. That is like, it's so, so deep in all of us. It's also why all of
oh,
us yearn for connection. Whenever we talk with someone or argue with someone, what we are really yearning for is that connection. So what you're talking about there is like the baby being left in the cot. It's like the child, mom and dad turning their back because you've been naughty. It's like the worst of the worst to experience for us as humans because we are pack animals. We thrive on connection.
Mm.
yeah, yeah. And that's exactly how it felt.
Mm.
and and it moved through and and I was just exhausted and I stood up and I walked back to the hotel, and I got on with Vince's bot and was doing some engaging that way. And then in the morning, I went downstairs and I stopped at the front desk and I said, "Have you by chance had any cancellations?" And she said, "Yes, for one night."
That's amazing. That's
I said,
amazing.
"Wonderful." I went and got a bicycle. I drove all over town. It was just beautiful. And then the next day at another hotel, another night opened up. And so meeting the pain of that angst really allowed me to be totally okay being alone,
Mm.
really okay being alone. Um, and so I can't even identify anymore what is falling away, what part of the construct is dropped off. It just feels there's a certain amount of, though I wouldn't call it depression,
Mm. That
but
was exactly what I was going to ask you about.
yeah, no, I wouldn't call it depression, but there's just a going through the motions without caring too much about what happens. I don't know. There's a loss of caring, or not caring, identifying as the carer, maybe, which is
But
different.
if you're up for it, I would like for us to dive into, because there's still that underlying belief of an experience being real. There's still a starting point in it. So if you would be up for it, I would love if we could dive into
I would love that.
that. So for everybody else, what I'm referring to is that what Irene experienced with sitting and having that feeling of being utterly alone, of being utterly, you know, unloved in the entire universe, that is so old. That feeling is so old and is so recognizable to all of us. We have all had periods in our lives where we have just felt that deep, deep, deep loneliness. For when if you have experienced it at a young age, then as a teenager, that is when you start to consider to unaliving yourself, or where we have that feeling of being absolutely alone, and then we start to seek for a partner or for friendships or for meaning, and where we divert away from that feeling of inadequacy, because what we tend to do is that we turn it inwards, that there's something wrong with me since I am alone. So we start to divert from that feeling of inadequacy or feeling of being alone, which is so uncomfortable. So we focus on more or less the opposite. Look how perfect I am. And now I am an accountant. And now I am, revered by my peers. And now I have lots of money. And now so we try to mask over that deep, deep feeling of aloneness that we have. And at some point after 40, we realize that, okay, that is made of spider web. It's so thin. It's like house of cards. It just the smallest blow, a trip to Paris where you feel alone, and then all of it just come tumbling right away. And it's because all of it was built on diversions for really feeling what is there. So for everybody else, I can warmly recommend you to look into that feeling of being alone in the universe. And when you have reached that point, I would like for you to pose the question of that starting point. Can you ever be alone in the universe? And who is the I that is alone in the universe? I mean, I'm sitting and making an inhalation right now that is partly thoughts, exhalation from the plants, but it's also containing atoms and molecules from Jesus, from the Big Bang, from everybody who is here. I'm sitting and inhaling the same oxygen that you guys have inhaled. it is impossible for me to be alone in the universe. There is no beginning and end on this being, what is perceived as a biological being here, and this is my edge. Well, is it really? Are you sure? We know that the skin is the biggest organ that we have because we're breathing, we're taking everything in. You can feel on your body when somebody's angry, not by what they're saying or with your thoughts, but you can feel it in your body, you. So where does that boundary that we believe is there, where is that boundary actually? And is it actually there? Or is it just something we had just concocted in our minds that is just mind created? If you really truly dive into that dissolving of beliefs of who I am, who is that I that we are clinging to? And if you let that go, what are you actually letting go of? Toddy has such a good metaphor where he says that if you have a pool full of water and everybody says there's no water in that pool at all, does that change anything? And if they suddenly say, oh, that pool is full of water, does that actually change anything? Is there suddenly more water in the pool than there was all along? And it's that belief that we can have about an I being here. When you don't believe in that anymore, has anything really changed? Or is it just you seeing through a delusion that has been there all along? Can you ever be alone in the universe? If there isn't an I, a separate I here anywhere with any boundary whatsoever, how can that be um, outside of the universe? I mean, we're on a ball, molting ball, flying through space, um, and there's no difference between. There's a difference in the density of the molecules here and here, but there's no difference in the molecules, if I can say it like that. So me identifying with this density that is here as a separate self, it's just mind formation. It's just mental formations that I'm creating. And in that, I'm creating a distance to everything else and everyone else. But that is just mind created. There is no difference. I am you. You are me. And we are, the trees and the animals and people that has walked the earth and people that will walk the earth.
Mm.
So really
I get
dissolving.
that.
Yeah,
I
really
get that. I
dissolving
get
that
that
belief.
intellectually. I get totally. I'm totally on the same page with you. But when that was happening, that was really felt very, like you said, almost like a baby in a crib.
Mm.
It was old and all of that. So so there's the intellectual understanding, and then there's the experience that felt so real. So what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your when you were sitting there? I'm sure there was a lot of bodily sensation that was arising with that thought, right? So do you know now, and it's always harder looking back on it, but were you aware of which one came first? Did you have sensation in the body and then a thought about I am alone in the universe. There's no one here coming to help me. Or was that thought first and then
Yeah, the thought was first, I think.
good?
That's my sense.
Yeah.
My memory is horrible.
Well, join the club. And it's really hard with those things because they tend to come on a lot of times before we're really aware of it. I mean,
Yeah.
you're in a different country, you're sitting down on a bench, and all of a sudden you just get flooded with this emotion. And it is hard when we're not like actively engaging and parsing out, okay, what just happened? Um, so, but with this, because it's pointing back to something that is so old and so eh, base in our experience, it's important to notice that because it's still there. It's not that you've probably gone through it now and then it's just totally depleted itself. It's still a potential for this biological organism to be in a situation where it suddenly feels very much isolated and very much at the whims of the forces of something much greater than it. It's the perspective that we've had for most of our lives. I am here located in this little body, and I have to protect myself or manipulate the world in such a way that I am safe as I move through it because there are countless animals, bacteria, and people who are out there to harm me. And even if that's in the case of just nobody having a free room for me to, take for the night, that sort of thing has that deep biological urgency of survival built into it.
Mhm.
So actively, when you're not in one of those situations, bringing to mind something that engages that concern, something that feels existentially dangerous. If you bring that to mind and then feel that arising in the body,
Mhm.
and with that, as it arises, does this feel um, like it is pointing to the vulnerability of one specific character, one characterizable being? Like there is the one who is seen to be in danger, the one who is at threat. Do you have a representation of that in the mind? It might be a visual image of the body. It might be more of a gross conceptualization of everything that you've taken to be Irene over the past 10 years or something. It might be a physical sense in the body of the body's existence here. What are you actually experiencing when you have that fear about the existential threat of mortality, which is really
Mhm.
what it gets to the point of?
There's an energetic something like just above the solar plexus in the lower part of the chest. It's kind of has a flavor of grief and sadness.
Mm,
Um, I'm feeling it on the inside.
mhm.
Uh,
As you breathe into that sensation in the solar plexus, feel into it and ask, who is this grief for? It's good. Just keep breathing through it.
who is this grief for? I don't know who it's who is it for?
Don't use the mind. Just drop in the question like a pebble in a pond and just see what it evokes.
What comes up is children, the innocence of children. That's what comes up.
Mm. And what does that mean for you in you? Where is that innocence in where is that the vulnerability of that innocence that you hold?
It's so ephemeral. This vulnerability is like ephemeral, and it's almost it can't even be protected.
Mm. What
There's
gives
nothing strong enough to protect this innocent vulnerability.
what gives the impression as you're feeling that, what gives you the impression that it is actually vulnerable and needs to be protected?
It's partially something in the chest area, but it's also partially a belief, I think, or a narrative
Yeah.
of yeah, I think it's partially a belief that about vulnerability
Mm.
or about not being able to protect.
Yeah. Can you find something in your direct experience right now which is actually quantifiably vulnerable, that is actually in need of protection?
Huh. I don't find anything right now. But I see that previously there was some image of like a baby, like
Mhm.
a child that isn't present now.
As a baby, we are incredibly vulnerable in terms of the physical being. It is at the mercy of parents or caregivers to provide what it needs to survive. It can't survive on its own. As we get older, we extrapolate that out to not just being the vulnerability of the physical organism for getting its needs met, but it gets taken to mean something more. It becomes the idea that this being, whatever that is, this awareness, this life force, whatever it is that we experience, that that is also at the mercy of the gods and everything else to protect it, to be protected, and that it
Mm.
is in some way vulnerable. But that's just this arising belief which has been built off of this primal um, primal biological defense mechanism to keep the biological organism alive. So every time we have that, it's useful to look for where is that vulnerable being located that is supposed to be the one that needs protection. Can it
Mm.
be found? That's the belief that's pointing to something which doesn't actually exist.
Mhm. Yeah, and in this moment, it can't be found.
Exactly. And in no moment can it ever be found.
Mm.
But it's important for us to practice so that we can remember that in times where it feels very, very true and
Yeah,
very sticky, like sitting on a bench with no place to stay in a foreign country.
yeah.
That feeling of isolation and of powerlessness creates that same urge in the body that I need somebody to take care of me. I need something else. And in that, we completely overlook the fact that, as Pernilla said, we are in that moment entirely connected to everything in the
Right.
universe. That we can't define the Irene sitting on the bench separate from anything else. So those are the moments where if we can remember to come back to the present and look for what it is that is presumed to be vulnerable in this moment and allow that looking to dissolve that core of believed vulnerability, that one that is believed to be vulnerable, that dissolves. And with
Mm.
that, it can open you to having that experience of just being in the flow of whatever is moving around you in that moment. You
Mhm.
are then a part of the country. You are a part of everything that's there.
Yeah.
And then we just keep coming back to that as much as we can remember.
Well, I trust that life will give me the opportunity to practice that.
Without doubt.
To be clear about
Without
it,
that,
Without
or
doubt.
without that.
Without
or
a doubt.
not, or maybe I don't need it. But yeah, I see that. And it does take practice to,
It does.
in those very, very intense moments, to recognize, where is that one that needs protecting?
It's a
And
very strong
And
urge.
and also it's very important in that moment not to bypass at all, but because we can very quickly jump into the but there is no one here.
Yeah.
But that is bypassing that old hurt that the body still remembers as being real because it was perceived as real.
Yeah.
So it's really allowing to feel that alongside and but then just be the adult in the room that we didn't have access to back when the hurt was created.
Yeah.
So it's not bypassy at all. It's really embracing every experience you have in the moment, but still being that rooted adult in the room that can say, but feel into this. I'm right here. Breathe into it. Notice that there is an end of all of it. And where is the one that is scared or feeling vulnerable? And is vulnerability actually a thing, or is it a mind created experience in the moment?
Mm.
So much of what we deal with as adults is like leftovers
Yeah.
of old biological processes from childhood that
Yeah.
have taken on very aggrandized new meaning.
Their own lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the urge to cry, to say I'm hungry and need food, gets taken to mean all sorts of grand existential things that we feel like we need. And it's because the mind is basically using, I mean, we I had read a long time ago, I can't remember a lot of the specifics, but it's like even in terms of where we have reused certain parts of the brain as we have evolved to um, uh, take on more and more kind of culturally significant or socially relevant tasks. So like for instance, when we see something like actually, rotting food, or we smell rotting food, we feel physically disgusted. It's like we feel revolved. But then when we hear something politically that we disagree with, we say, "Oh, that's disgusting. I'm disgusted by that thing." And it's because that's actually using the same part of the brain to take in the emotional beliefs about um, value judgments and political beliefs and all that. It's using the same parts of the brain that actually engage with biological disgust that keeps us from eating
Eating
rotting
rotting
meat
food.
and getting sick. So we are using those same basic structures with these kind of more evolved and subtle sociological overlays, and we kind of do the same thing with all of these
Everything.
different,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so it's like we can kind of see the biological underpinning, but then we put so much more on top of it and make it into something so much, uh, yeah, just more
Yeah,
uh,
but yeah, different.
grandiose
Yeah,
and different from
and
how
different
it,
from what it,
it
and
really
it's
is.
also why it is possible to pick everything apart, because a lot of the visceral experiences that we have are actually not visceral. It's just different parts of the brain that has connected something. What is firing together is wiring together. So we just have ideas about something being in a certain way, and if we don't question it, we just assume that is how it is. But in the
Mhm.
moment, we can question it and pick it apart, and then you will have a new visceral experience of reality in this moment that is very, very different than what we were wired to believe.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you
you.
so much.
It's
And
great.
welcome home.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
Nice to have you back.
We have created a course of our first Feta material. This course will walk you step by step through all of the ways in which identification is created and selfing happens. If you've been struggling to see through the self structure or have that first awakening shift, this course contains hundreds of tools to help you discover the selfing mechanisms when they're happening, and then see through the illusion of identification that are created. Along with over 14 hours of videos, this $49 course contains a full book worth of summaries, extrapolations on the videos, written inquiry suggestions, and other text. So work slowly, leave time for integration. This is powerful material and it can be life-changing.